Hey, I'm Guy Powell, and welcome to the next episode of the backstory on the Shroud of Turin. If you haven't already done so, please visit guypowell.com and sign up for more of these episodes. I am the author of the book The Only Witness, which is a Christian historical fiction tracing a possible history of the Shroud over the last 2 millennia. Today I'm speaking with Stephen Jones. And let me tell you a little bit more about him. He's a longtime Shroud researcher, probably one of the longest, and he's located down in Perth, Australia, so a great spot to be, and he's been blogging on the Shroud for over 20 years. He's interested in Christianity, the life of Jesus, and of course the Shroud, and you can find his blog at theshroudofturin.blogspot.com, theshroudofturin.blogspot.com. So, Stephen, how's things going? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with the Shroud of Turin.
Yeah, thanks, Guy. I was 39 years a Christian. I'm an evangelical Protestant, and if I had heard about the Shroud, I can't remember it. But in 2005, I saw a book in a second-hand bookstore called Verdict on the Shroud by Gary Habermas and Ken Stevenson. And because I knew that Gary Habermas was a sound evangelical philosopher, I bought the book, and I was amazed at the amount of evidence there is for the Shroud. And pretty well when I finished the book, I was persuaded by the evidence that the Shroud is Jesus' burial shroud.
Yeah, it is certainly one of the better books, and I've spoken with Ken, and I haven't yet interviewed Gary Habermas, but hoping to be able to see him. And you're so right. There are so many pieces of evidence that really point to the Shroud, and of course, there's there's always the skeptics out there. But nevertheless, so where do you see as your special expertise as a Shroud scholar and researcher?
No special expertise. The Shroud's such a vast subject that nothing can really prepare you for it. It's got issues of theology, history, science. But basically, I've always been interested. Obviously, I've been a Christian for now almost 60 years, and I'm very interested in the Bible and Bible science. I did end up doing a science degree. So all this sort of helps to prepare for it.
Yeah, absolutely. It sure does. And so what kind of what you said Bible sciences. So tell us a little bit more about that. What do you mean by that?
I came from a non-Christian home, and after the first, and I always have been interested in science, even as a kid. And so in the end, I had to think about how does it all fit. And I bought a book by Bernard Ram a long time ago, Christian View of Science and Scripture. And he said it's like two books. Nature is God's book of nature, and Scripture is God's book of Scripture. And they've got the same author, therefore they must ultimately agree. And that's been a big help to me. So I've been interested in Bible science. For a time I blogged on the internet, or I was in intelligent design movement. I debated creation evolution, but in the end, the Shroud is really what I focused on.
So was it the Shroud that got you to become a Christian, or was it a handful of things?
No, I was a Christian 40 years before I discovered the Shroud, and I can't remember if I thought about it at all. If I did, I would have thought it's another fake relic. I'm being a Protestant, I'm not into Catholic theology all that much, but certainly become much more aware of the history of the Shroud since then. Yep.
Yeah. Interesting. And I think you're right. I think the Shroud is not necessarily something that can convert you. Certainly it can, but it certainly is kind of one of those check boxes, which is just kind of interesting, I think, and can certainly add to your Christian faith and realize then what Jesus suffered, and just suffered so greatly for us and for the redemption of all of us.
Yeah, well, I think Brother books calls it the fifth gospel because it fills in a lot of the details. The Gospels really gloss over pretty much the terrible what scourging is and what crucifixion is, and it certainly adds to your understanding of Roman crucifixion and what the terrible suffering. It's really hard to believe that God would choose that method, but He did, and it's just amazing. That's why they say, even Paul says, even the death of the cross. So we don't understand what that means, but they did back in the first century.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. And and there's no question. There's some folks that believe that he didn't die on the cross, but in my mind, and certainly with the shroud, he died. And
Uh,
and that
no
means,
one, I think there was one survivor of crucifixion. They cut him down, but he probably died anyway of wounds. But no one survived crucifixion.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's no way. Plus all of the the beating and the flogging and
Oh
I
yeah.
mean the number of scars that he has on his hands and back and legs and
Oh,
everywhere where
you.
he was just flogged over 100
Yeah.
times. Yeah,
Well, you couldn't fake death on the cross because you've got to be continually raising yourself up to breathe, then slumping down, and you couldn't fake it. If you stop doing that for a minute, you die of asphyxiation. So that's why it was absolutely you could not fake being dead on the cross.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then you had the Roman soldiers that are there to watch over you and make sure you died, because if they didn't die, then as a Roman soldier you would be killed.
Well, they were experts at crucifixion, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Their expertise, and they certainly knew exactly how to do it. That's for sure. So now you've been writing on this theory that you have. It's called my hacker theory. Tell us about that.
In 2007, I used, just going back a bit, in the 1990s, I was the system administrator of a wide area network of hospital computers. And I read this book about, way before I was even interested in the Shroud, by Clifford Stoll about the cuckoo's egg. And it was about hacking in the 1990s or 1980s. And when I read in David Sox's book about the radiocarbon dating, it just said all this was under computer control. And it suddenly twigged to me, well, hang on, with the AMS, which is called accelerated mass spectrometry, that's a fully computerized system. The computer does it all. And so all you have to do is a hacker could get get between the computer, behind the actual dating machine and the display on the screen, and the scientists would see this dating, but it's not the actual dating that's going on in the machine. So a hacker could easily alter the program, and that was my theory. That was about 2007, but it wasn't until 2014 that I really started looking at that seriously, because I had a lot to learn, and I just assumed that everybody knew the answer. But as I went along further, I discovered lots of theories about how the radiocarbon date could be so wrong. A first century shroud has got a 14th century radiocarbon date. So how did that be? But I've come to the conclusion the only theory that fits the facts is that it was actually a hacker. And I've identified two hackers, which is possible that, there was a Timothy Linick. He was a physicist at Arizona Radiocarbon Dating Laboratory, and a Carl Koch, who is known to be a hacker for the KGB over in Germany. And because the problem is that the AMS system is not online. So Linick could easily do Arizona because that was his computer, but or his laboratory. But it's not hard. You just foray those AMS machines. All you have to do is insert a tape and load it up. And so all you have to do is get someone to do it for you. And that's my theory that this guy called Carl Koch did it. Both had this unusual suicide. Koch's one definitely was murder. It was impossible that he could have. He was found. His body was found burnt with gasoline, burned by gasoline, and yet it was in a dry forest. So someone put the fire out. Well, he couldn't put his own fire out. With Timothy Linick, he was murdered. He was found dead of suicide The day after Cox it was announced that the body was burned was Cox. So my theory is that the KGB, it was so successful for the KGB to do this, because if you go back to 1890, 1889, the Soviet Union collapsed. In 1888, it was on the verge of collapse. It had a lot of Roman Catholics and Russian Orthodox, hundreds of millions of people in the Soviet Union who believed the Shroud was authentic, but obviously the official thing was it's not. So it was really a big threat to them. So Flinick approached the Soviet embassy in San Francisco, which was a known hub of Soviet, getting recruiting.
Yeah.
And he offered them, I can give you a date just before the Shroud appeared in history in 3055. Give me a lot of money. They would have jumped at it. It doesn't actually mean they ever gave him the money, because they murdered him and probably didn't pay him the money. They probably said the meeting was to give him the money, and they murdered him, saved them the money. So yeah, sorry I rambled on a bit.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That's an interesting hypothesis, and you wonder how, because I don't know. I personally, I think the dating, the actual technology of the dating was probably correct. I think the real challenge is on the samples, but I hadn't, now that you're bringing up about the, possibly hacking the accelerator mass spectrometer machines.
Well, see, most Shroudies, they're not from the IT world. I used to be a hospital administrator, and they recruited me to oversee this network, and I ended up becoming a member of the health department IT branch. And so, it was pretty obvious to me that this is something that could happen, but it doesn't. The average Shroud, author is into science or into history, but not computers. And you can understand why they are a bit reluctant to accept this. But let's face it, they've been going at this for about 30 odd years trying to explain it, and they've all got these multiple theories, which I've shown that don't hold water. And the hacking theory does hold water, but it's unusual. It's a conspiracy theory. Obviously, the KGB conspired. But today we think conspiracy theories are all automatically wrong, but they're not. Watergate was a conspiracy theory, but turned out to be true. And the movie conspiracy theory, the theory turned out to be true. So yeah, and I certainly don't have the hallmarks of conspiracy theory, because I'm not. If I'm refuted, I don't then flick over to some new thing. I stick with my argument, and no one's proved me wrong. So I'm happy to. Quite confident this was, and lots of things have come. It'll be in my book. I have a chapter in my book called "Were the Laboratories Duped by a Hacker?" And I'm actually right at the very moment doing a update of my hacker theory in a nutshell. So I'm sort of bringing it all together in a more compact form.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have some thoughts on the actual dating and the results that came out. Let's talk about that.
Well, it was finally announced in the 1989 Nature, February the 16th Nature article, and I've actually I showed you some of the problems that the hacker. It supports my hacker theory, because I could just show you this. I showed you this before. People can see this. That's the table 1 of the Nature article, and the interesting thing about that is that's sample 1 is the Shroud, and you've got Arizona, Oxford, and Zurich. The interesting thing is that their first date, Arizona's date of 591, which works out to 591 plus or minus 30. I'll just show you another thing. Here is the more simple form. Whoops, can you see that?
Yep.
So I'll have to read it. So Arizona's date, which works out to be 1359, is the most recent of all the laboratory date. That was necessary for the hacker to do that. I'll explain that in a minute. Oxford's date, first run date, was the least recent, oldest of all the laboratories' dates, and Zurich's first date was the most, is it recent or oldest? I can't remember now, of Zurich's dates. The chance of all this happening by chance is 1 in 60. So, it's very unlikely. And I'm going to eventually write to Nature and say, here's this curious fact. This first date of each of the laboratories is significant, and this fits the theory that a hacker used those dates as the anchor point of his theory. And I've always done a bit of work on it. Sorry if I'm rambling on, but I've actually, believe I've reverse engineered his algorithm. That basically you start with that number, and you start with start date, target date, and you use random numbers. You can pretty well generate. It's guaranteed to end up being the date it was going. It ended up being 1260 to 1390. So I'll be doing more on my blog with that reverse engineering. But it's in the Nature article. It's really a weird thing that no one seems to have noticed, that each laboratory's first run was unusual. Arizona's was the most recent, Oxford was the least recent, and Zurich was, I believe, the least recent of Zurich's, but you can almost ignore Zurich. There were 3 laboratories. Because the hacker had to start off with this psychologically important date of 1350, which convinced everybody straight away, because he was leaking this date, and everybody, when they saw it, that's it, which was not, they were so convinced by it, it almost didn't need any further evidence. But because he started with this most recent date, he had to balance Oxford's and Zurich's with least recent dates. So, as I say, I've already done a bit of this on my blog, and I'll do a bit more to prove that you can actually reverse engineer the dating by a simple method. Because what the problem was, the machines were not online, so he had to write this program to operate automatically. So they just keep feeding these dates in. It would just simply do the same thing. It would just, wouldn't how many times you did it, it would end up arriving at this using this method of random number within limits. So it's pretty well foolproof. And it's this. So I'll be writing to Nature, pointing this out. But you can't. All you can do to say with Nature is say this is something really unusual. What's the explanation? Because they won't listen to you any.
Yeah. No, I know, and especially since many of the original authors in that article, the Nature article from February 1989, which published the results, and then you had that table. So that's interesting. So
most of them are either dead or retired. It's just 30. What's 89? It's 11 plus 36 years ago. So they've all long moved past that. Yeah.
Whether they're dead or retired, they're certainly no longer in the business of science and things like that, I would imagine.
Yeah, but if I proved that the algorithm, I can reverse engineer it, that's as good as confession.
Yeah.
Because you can't get past that.
So
I'm working on that. I've already done a bit in Excel, a bit of an example, and I've pretty well worked out how it could happen, and I'll be posting on that eventually.
Yeah. So if they hacked those machines, then does that mean that the subsequent measurements that they did on other items, not the shroud, but other items, would also be now incorrect?
Radiocarbon dating, and the control samples were dated really well. There's actually in the Nature article an admission that the controls were all very close together and genuine, but the shroud sample was way apart, a range of about 204 years from the same sample taken within millimeters or centimeters of each other, had a range of 200 odd years. So obviously something weird's going on, and it's the proof is there in the article itself. And I mentioned it wasn't peer reviewed because Professor Hall of Oxford was retiring in a few months, and he was an extremely wealthy man. His grandfather had struck gold in Queensland, Australia, and so he was funding the Oxford laboratory out of his own money, but he had this 45 rich friends who were going to donate £1 million to endow a chair of Oxford radiocarbon dating, so that it could continue being funded by this endowment. And so they were in a big hurry to put out this article, and Michael Tite from British Museum admitted it. Instead of putting the experiment in a proper radiocarbon dating journal, he put it in Nature, which is like a popular science thing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't peer reviewed. He almost admitted that. And so it's really this paper that's supposed to be so important has never been repeated, never been peer reviewed. It just survives because it fits the skeptical view of the world. Christianity's got to be false. The shrouds, and then among Christians, a lot of them think the shroud's false. So it's really hard to sort of break through this idea that God has done something absolutely amazing that we would not. I think it's one of the Philippians that says he can do. No, Colossians might be. He can do far more than we can, exceeding abundantly what we can ask or think. And I've got that in my book. That I've got Christian friends who say, no, it can't be right. They think that God, and it's amazing, it's a miracle. This Roy Max Morgan said it's a perpetual miracle. You can see like water being turned into wine on the internet. You can see a miracle just by blogging. You can find on the internet a miracle that cannot be explained. Science can't explain it, and so forth. Yep, I better shut up. I keep raving on.
No, that's all right. So the what you're saying is that we have three machines: Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona, and they measured the. So one thing you said, which was fascinating,
First of all,
is
they're identical machines. They're actually identical machines and identical computer programs. They were provided by this company. I can't think of the name at the moment. General INX. And they're identical. So all you need to do is write a program that works on one machine and get someone to install the program on the other two. And so it'd be child's play for the KGB. I mentioned in that book by Clifford Stoll, he said laboratories didn't bother locking their doors because, the ones that were very special classified information, they did, but these ones were not. And there was actually a big fault in the program. They didn't bother patching because it suited their just to jump on the machine and log in. It'd been very easy for KGB to insert the Linux program on the other two computers. In the middle of the night, they could get their way in. My son can pick locks, so it would be child's play for them to do it. Not very hard at all. Yeah.
Well, but. Interesting that they were all exactly the same machine. Now, but what you said as well was on the control, the difference in the measurements were significantly lower than the difference in the measurements of the shroud.
Yeah, when you do any scientific experiment, you're supposed to have a control to make sure that you have these samples of known date, and if the radiocarbon dating is pretty close to the known date, you're on the right track. So all the controls, there were three of them, they were all pretty good. They dated pretty accurately. So that the system was working, but the shroud date was way a 200-year gap between and that's all there on the Nature article. It's suppressed a bit. They were not very candid, but you can easily work it out. It's obviously, it just should not have been, it didn't pass peer review because it wasn't peer reviewed. It just was published and everybody thought that's it.
Yeah. Well, and such an important, at least to the Christian world and certainly the shroud, world, that such an important article and such an important measurement. Because up until then, radiocarbon dating was really thought of as being the gold standard in measuring, archaeological finds.
Carbon dating's got its problems, but no one's challenging it's broadly accurate. It can, if you can get carbon contamination, it can throw the date way out. So it's not 100% accurate, but no one's really challenging it in general. It's just in the dating of the shroud. I would admit there's actually a problem of dating linen. linen is composed of millions of little tubes, and carbon dioxide, which carbon 14 has a thing as carbon 14 dioxide, it's dissoluble in water. So it's the chance of carbon getting into these tubes and not being able to get it out again makes it problematic when you could ever really date linen accurately. And there have been some really weird dates of linen. So I don't think the shroud would have dated first century anyway. Might have dated fourth century or something like that because of this problem of unremovable carbon. But fourth century would be pretty good.
Well, yeah, and the it's interesting that that the dispersion or whatever it is that you call it of the measurements of the shroud material are significantly different than those of the sample. And
Yeah, it's there in the Nature article. I've blogged about it a lot on my. If people log into my blog, I've got a newcomer start here a link, and you follow that through, you'll get a pretty good background of the shroud, including the carbon dating. So, but it's a very big subject and very hard to. It's probably one of the problems. It takes a little bit of thinking about, and
yeah,
people
yeah,
need to think.
yeah. Now you mentioned the peer review process. Tell us, tell us what that is, and then tell
Yeah,
us how the Nature article did not follow a traditional peer
yeah.
review
Well,
article.
peer review is a protection mechanism by science to make sure that a claim that's in a scientific paper is correct. And so they send it off to three or four other experts in that field. And anonymously they reply, these are problems of the paper, and the author often corrects that, and then it's published. So there's a sort of a correcting mechanism in science, but it's got problems. One of the problems with the carbon dating, the accelerated mass spectrometry, AMS, is a very small group, and they're all nuclear physicists. They all know each other. It'd be pretty hard for someone to anonymously say, "This is what I think," and they say, "We know who that is." So it's a problem of radiocarbon dating but it can be done. I mean, there are good peer review going on, but the Nature article was never peer reviewed. AMS was only just in its beginnings back in 89, 88. I can't remember when it was first, 77, I think it was first successful. So it's only, 11 years or something before 80. So it was really quite early. And to get a group of experts familiar with it, there would have been only a handful who could do it. So it really wasn't peer reviewed. It's really it should be withdrawn. It's so many problems with the paper that if they were interested in truth, they would withdraw it, which would be amazing if that happened. Because they've called a guy in England, I can't remember his name at the moment, but he got maybe it wasn't in England himself, but he got the British Museum under Freedom of Information Act.
Yeah,
He got
Tristan
all their raw
Casabianca.
data, and he found out it was all. They certainly couldn't claim that it was within 60%, 95% accuracy.
Yep.
It riddled with errors. So it really should be withdrawn. It was. I would mention they could do it again. They could. There is a sample in Arizona that never got dated. That could be dated, and I have mentioned to you about the future that they could date pollen. Way back, I can't remember the year I did it. I actually proposed. I read in the USGS Geological Survey that they could date pollen, which turns out to be false. Well, they can do it, but they need a lot of pollen. And so I proposed why not date the shroud's pollen? Because pollen is almost impervious to contamination. It's almost indestructible. It's a very tough little particle.
Right.
And but it turns out at that stage they couldn't date. They needed too much sample of pollen. But it's getting to the stage when they are dating pollen, and there is actually a lot of pollen in the Max Fry collection, which the last I heard was under Alan Wanger, but he died. And what's ever happened to it? But there's possibly if carbon dating gets down to it can date a reasonable, maybe 10,000 grains of pollen, and the fry sample has got 10,000 grains of pollen, it could be dated, and that would be a slam dunk, because it's, you can't really argue contamination with pollen. It'll be very accurate. So we'll wait and see if that ever happens. But it would certainly be, I mentioned, it would be delicious irony if carbon dating ended up proving that the carbon dating of the Shroud was false.
Well, on the yeah, exactly. But on the peer review process, just going back to that a second,
Yeah,
one thing that I think is true is that even if the paper was peer reviewed, quite often they only get the paper to read. They don't necessarily get the raw data.
yeah. This is the problem. When I did my science degree, we did a philosophy of science unit, and it's one of the problems of science is this idea that science is self-correcting. But you need a lot of money to do a sort of experiment. They've got to apply for a grant. And most authors are more interested in their own theory than proving somebody else's theory is wrong. Only some very large, say, biomedical papers do they want to review it. So, yeah, no one has ever gone back and redone it. And I doubt if they could. I mean, I mentioned before the Vatican's got a day job running a big Turin. Is 2 million Catholics, bigger than ours, some countries or states. They haven't got time to be doing this sort of stuff. One of the problems is, dating the Shroud. It generates so much controversy, and the crowd world is now so divided. You'd be battling to get some sort of like a STIRP. Remember, STIRP was the Shroud of Turin research project, and back in the 80s, they had developed quite a consensus, and so the Vatican allowed them to date the Shroud. But today, I doubt you never get that consensus, so it's probably never going to happen. But there are parts of the Shroud that are out there in the public. The pollen's out there in the public. The Vatican's given approval to take the pollen. The sample A1 of Arizona, the Vatican's already approved that. So there are, Professor Fanti in Italy is doing things like examining the Shroud's dust and stuff like that. A lot is happening without having to date the Shroud itself. They can date material that's come from the Shroud, and all that has continually shown that the Shroud does cover the area of the first century. It doesn't come up to exactly the first century, but it spans 3 or 4 different tests span the area of the first century. It certainly does not span the 14th century.
Yeah, and it's funny, if you think about having witnesses in a jury trial, for something, if they all came up with exactly the same answer and exactly the same wording, then you would think that there would be collusion. And so one of the things too is, there have been so many different tests on the age, and then recently the WAX-S, the wide area X-ray scattering. And all of them have different bands of error, which is what you would expect. Some of them are a little bit newer, some of them a little bit older, and whether the band is close or not, it's when you're talking about something like this, you would expect that. You would expect that there's going to be differences.
The Shroud dated 1260 to 1390. The midpoint of that is 1325, which is 30 years before the Shroud first appeared in history. I mean, the Shroud goes right back. No one disputes that the Shroud appeared in 1355, and the carbon dating dated 1325. So it's really too good to be true. I mean, no one thought before the dating, even the people doing the dating didn't think it would date that accurately, and so it's really too good to be true. It's definitely part of the proof of it being a hacking is such a good date. You expect a Professor Tipler said it's a miracle, and he actually believes it was. I mean, he's a strange physicist, but he thinks God actually produced the Shroud date, which is a bit ridiculous, but it's more likely to say that humans. Well, I'm not claiming the laboratories knew about it. I think they've suspected it, But the chapter of my book will be, were the laboratories duped by a computer hacker? I'm not at all accusing laboratories of being crooked or something, although I think after the event they did realise Arizona had been hacked, but they probably thought, well, how could Zurich and Oxford be hacked? So they probably thought this is in Professor Gove, who was the leader of the radiocarbon dating. He said that he suspected someone in Arizona leaked this 1350 date, but he said, "What doesn't matter?" But I'm just in my recent blog post, I'm pointing out that this photograph of Linux standing in front of everybody. They took a historic photograph of the dating after it had been successful, according to their idea, and they took a photo of Linux right in the front of everybody to acknowledge that he was in charge of the computer programs, and that they acknowledged that he was the one who proved the Shroud was medieval. But Gove had taken that photo and he couldn't do another one. So he's got that photo in his book, but he hardly mentioned Linux at all. One line, not even a sentence. So that's proof to me that he knew that Linux had done it, but he didn't want to ruin the whole thing. So
Yeah. Well, one thing too is all of the politics that were even between the scientists, and I like I like your point about the if it is the KGB, then with that right there, where they need to prove that Christ did not exist, that it was a fraud and everything, and because they had outlawed religion, and so that's kind of an interesting political thing at that kind of at the national level.
Yeah, I mean, the Soviets back in the old, if you're old enough to remember the Soviet Union, as you and I probably are, they ran an extensive, for example, Karl Koch, Marcus Hess, and one other were involved in hacking into computers, America, other places, and selling the information to the Soviet Union, who were trying to catch up to America in science, and they did it by stealing secrets. And so they were paying them handsomely for this information. So if Linux had said to them, look, I can give you the Shroud's date, just before it appeared in history, what's it worth? They would have probably paid him $1 million. But so he never got the $1 million. So they probably killed him rather than pay him. So I would just mention that somebody might say, oh, this is defamatory. He died 89 plus, that's 11 plus 36 years ago. So he's been dead 36 years. So was Koch. You can't defame a dead person. He was actually separated from his wife when it happened, so she's now died as well. So there's no one being defamed, and I didn't know about the Shroud until 2005, and he'd already died in 89. So it's no case that I'm being libeling him. I'm saying this because I think it's true, and supporting it with evidence. But I've got no axe to grind about him personally. I feel sorry for him in a way.
Right. All right. So before we close, you have a book coming out called The Shroud of Turin, The Burial Sheet of Jesus. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's got an exclamation mark. Yeah, Ian Wilson put out possibly the greatest shroud book of all time in 1378 called The Shroud of Turin, Burial Cloth of Jesus, ? That was in the 1970s when question mark was appropriate. I mentioned in my book, I'm not really stealing his title, but there's no copyright of book titles. But I put exclamation mark. I said, well, it's called Shroud of Turin, Burial Sheet of Jesus, ! Because the evidence now is overwhelming that the shroud is the burial sheet of Jesus.
Yeah. So you go through all of the evidence that's available, and do you include then the recent WAX-S data?
Yep, it's all in my blog. All on my blog. If you go into my blog, and usually if you search for the term and put Shroud of Turin blog in your search term, it'll come up. And I've blogged a lot of stuff over the years. My blog has just recently passed 2 million page views, And if you work that out per day, it's a lot of viewing. I'm myself amazed how many people view the Shroud, my blog, but must be. My blog goes into Russia. It's been blocked in China, and it goes into Poland. So there's places close, I say even Russia itself is going into there, and it's like a bit like the gospel, but it's not the gospel.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. That I mean, 2 million views is a lot. It takes a lot, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, so good. Kudos to you that you've been able to do that. So,
yeah.
anything
Thank
else
you.
you'd like to talk about before we break? You had a
I just
picture
mentioned
of.
that. Yeah, I mentioned that one of my discoveries is I'll show you the book really, rather than the picture. That in the catacomb, can you see this book? I'll twist that close. See that
Yeah.
picture
Uh-huh.
in the top left right hand corner? I can't remember.
Yep.
There's a
Yep, I
picture of
see it.
Jesus in the catacombs of Rome.
Uh-huh.
I'll just leave it up there for a moment. It was in the deepest part of the catacombs of Rome at the time of Nero, which is about AD 65. That's only 30 odd years after Jesus was crucified. And artist called Heaphy went to this catacomb. It was the last night he was there. It was pitch dark, but he had a candle, and he sketched this picture of Jesus, and he had him in profile, shroud-like in profile, and it's got a white cloth over his shoulder. It's there on my blog anyway. I claim that this is the earliest first century photograph. Get backtracking a bit. In the book of Romans 16, Paul lists a lot of Christians who he knew were originally in Jerusalem, who were now in Rome. So there were a lot of Christians in Rome who knew Jesus. One of the theories is, in fact, Saint Peter himself may have done that fresco. It's called a fresco. It's art on a limestone or rock picture. It's very heavily deteriorated. He sketched it when that catacomb was first opened, but a lady called Sylvia Bogadiscu, I can't remember, she went in and photographed it and proved that it's still there. It's very deteriorated. It's all on my blog. And it's surprising that the Shroud world hasn't picked this up. This is like the Holy Grail. This is
Really?
a shroud-like depiction of Jesus. That'd be enough itself in the first century, but it's also got a white cloth over his shoulder. Well, there's nothing in the Bible that says Jesus wore a white cloth. He was stripped naked when he was crucified. So the only thing he would have had over him was his shroud. So I claim that this is actually a picture. And also I get back to those who've seen the, what was it called, the Christ, the Passion of the Christ. If you remember the resurrection scene, the only way you can show someone's resurrected is in profile. If he comes up, you don't realise it, but in the movie, Jesus comes up in profile, and Ian Wilson, who was against Heaphy, admitted this was an odd man out fresco showing Jesus in profile. It's obvious it's Jesus in profile at the time of resurrection with the shroud over his shoulder. It's like,
Well,
it's
the other
just too
thing
good to be true, but it's there. It's in this book I just showed you. A very old book.
Well, the other thing that's
The person who
unique
did the book
about.
didn't realise what he was doing. In fact, no one's actually realised. Even Rex Morgan had that in his book. He didn't realise that's the shroud over Jesus' shoulder.
Yeah.
So I claim that as one of my discoveries. Yeah.
Well, the other thing about that image is that he has a beard, and Jesus in all depictions other than this one was never with a beard. He was shown as a young man without a beard and without with different hair until, as I
The
recall,
early
the third
depiction of
century.
Jesus was he was like Apollo, a
Yeah.
young
Yep.
sun god sort of thing. And the early Christians didn't like the idea of Jesus being crucified, and they'd rather focus on the idea that he's been resurrected.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until a while later, the 6th century, which is 500 and something AD, that you start, I think 544, you start seeing depictions of Jesus that are
Yeah.
shroud-like. In fact, the picture we've all got in our minds of what Jesus looked like comes from the shroud. If you
Yeah,
showed someone a
absolutely.
picture of the shroud, say, "Who's that?" They'll say, "Jesus," even though they doesn't know that it's. Of course, they think it's a fake, but in fact, there's no reason to think it's a fake at all.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Stephen, this has been really awesome, and really a couple of very interesting theories and a couple of interesting facts, and definitely appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
And yeah, and so the where you can reach Stephen and his blog, so you can hopefully get him over the 3 million mark. He's at the Shroud of Turin blogspot.com. And for the audience, please stay tuned for many other videos in this series on the backstory of the Shroud of Turin. And if you'd
Thank
like
you.
to, go to guypowell.com and sign up for more episodes. Stephen, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Guy.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you.